Joined now by the Democratic Congressman Roger Krishnamoorthi of Illinois. He serves on the House Intelligence and Oversight Committees. Congressman, good to see you. Good morning. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Good morning, Ali.
What do you make of all this, all the stuff that's going on? There's sort of two things happening, right? There's a bunch of different investigations and cases that are getting closer and closer to Donald Trump and his cronies. And there is this wild set of defenses coming out from Donald Trump. One includes targeting law enforcement and federal law enforcement and the FBI. And there's this other strange one, which I'm waiting to drop, which is his motion about the Fourth Amendment, which does not appear to have been violated in the execution of that warrant and that search of Mar-a-Lago.
That's right, Ali. I think that the closer that the FBI and the DOJ get to Donald Trump, I think the louder his social media protests are and the more vitriol there is in his rhetoric. And as someone mentioned before, he does have this megaphone where, you know, while the ordinary person spewing that rhetoric may not have an impact, Donald Trump certainly does. I was just looking at that graphic or that picture that you showed of the FBI field office in Cincinnati, and underneath the address it said Ronald Reagan Drive. And I think that unfortunately the Republican Party is not the one of Ronald Reagan, but Donald Trump. And at this point, that rhetoric is so hot, it's going to lead to violence, just like it did with the FBI office in Cincinnati.
You're on the Intel Committee, and there have been discussions for years about what's classified and why it should be classified and the process for classifying things and the difficulty in declassifying things when people don't think they should be classified. Does that play into this process? Donald Trump said that there was a standing order in which everything that left the White House and went to Mar-a-Lago was declassified. There's reporting from lots and lots of people around him who say they know nothing of such standing order. And even if it were true, declassification does have to have a process involved because there are agencies that classify documents. They would actually need to know that the president decided this was declassified. While he would have had a right to do so, there is a process involved. So give me a sense of this whole issue about classification and declassification and how relevant that is to this conversation.
Well, first of all, I just want to point out that with regard to the three laws that were actually invoked in the warrant, none of them depend on whether the documents at issue were classified or not. The classification of those documents does go, however, to the importance of those documents. And the fact that you had like a top secret, specialized compartmentalized information, TSSCI documents, shows you that this was probably the most grave of intelligence that the intelligence community possesses. And I think that with regard to this standing order, it never existed. I think 18 former Trump administration officials said that there was no such standing order. And in fact, there was even a process for declassification used by the Trump administration. In at least one instance, when President Trump wanted to declassify a binder of materials related to Crossfire Hurricane, the initial investigation of potential Trump campaign conspiracy with the Russians, it actually went through a process, Ali, where the Justice Department and the Trump administration and others went back and forth until they were able to arrive at what types of information should be declassified and shared with the public and what should not be.
I don't know what you know about the stuff that's been seized or the stuff that was being looked at. We don't know in the media, and it's possible by virtue of the nature of the documents we may not know if they're national security documents or nuclear documents or things like that. You and your colleagues on both committees that you're on, Intel and Oversight, sent a letter to Avril Haines, the Director of National Intelligence, asking for clarity on what? What is it that you're looking for from the Director of National Intelligence as it pertains to the documents seized at Mar-a-Lago?
Basically, what we're trying to figure out is, regardless of how those documents got to Mar-a-Lago, regardless of all the drama and any other shenanigans at play here, what was in those documents? What could have been exposed to adversaries, and what damage could have been done to our national security? That's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to figure out, how do we guard our national security in light of what we have discovered? And I think it's fair to say there are a lot of people concerned about the nature of those documents at Mar-a-Lago. And given the counterintelligence risks that have always been surrounding Donald Trump and the Trump administration, we're concerned that perhaps this information could have been exposed to people, our adversaries, who never should have had that information in the first place.
Congressman, good to see you this morning. Thank you for joining us. Democratic Representative Raja Krishnamoorthi of Illinois.